Stop right there, channel hopper. We have things to say.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to the All Directions podcast. I'm so glad you could join us today. Thank you very much. I am John One. That is Buzz from the Alcove, and yeah, this is All Directions podcast.
That's right. Same as always.
How did you join us? Yep. Looks a little better, doesn't it?
Looks pretty sweet.
Right, you then,
Yep.
friend.
Hello.
What are we up to today? What's the schedule?
Today we are talking about CG. In fact, it does cover what I was about to correct myself on, and which is because we're also going to be talking about like MS Paint and stuff.
Yeah.
Briefly. So essentially, we were talking about CG and potentially how long until not just scenery, but how long until we can get a fully animated CG character that looks rather, if not almost completely realistic.
It's basically like, how far do you think we are from basically not being able to tell the difference from real life and CGI characters on a screen, whether it be like actual, like monster type creatures or even like actual human being characters, because we're getting closer every single year. There's like often like mind-blowing CGI films and all that come out. Games are just getting better and better, at least graphically anyway. And but especially when they're trying to do like human characters in movies mostly, there's always just something that's slightly off about it.
Yeah.
I think just to temporarily sort of jump on the movie side before we sort of backtrack into stuff like the MS Paint and everything.
Yeah.
I just showed you a video earlier today.
Yeah.
This is basically one of the things that sort of jumped off this, started this conversation between the two. If you haven't checked this out, make sure you do. There's like a little 3-minute video. It's like a behind the scenes thing about how like the CGI and SFX were done for the latest Spider-Man movie that came out, Homecoming. And there's one shot where it's basically showing off like the Spider-Man character, Peter Parker, in his homemade Spider-Man outfit, and he's just like jumping around the room a bit, doing a little dance, walking back and forth. And you look at it and you're like, this is just a stupid video of a guy dressed up in a daft costume. But it looks like real life. He claims he can.
Yeah.
But watch it, because you'll think they're trying to trick you a bit.
Yeah.
Because it generally looks like real life. And yeah, I remember the first time I watched that video, I was like, if your CG is good in that very poorly done shot, why is the CG not that good in the actual overall film itself? Which, I'll be honest, his homemade suit in the movie is a lot better for CGI, especially when they show you what scenes are actually CGI, because you're like, okay, I'll tell you what, I did not know that was CGI. I actually thought that was him dressed up in the suit. The problem really comes from when he's in his Tony Stark made suit, because it's too perfect to be real. So that's why it's hard. But anyway, let's backtrack a bit. You want to start with MS Paint?
I do.
You? Okay, let's jump into that.
A very specific example of somebody literally took MS Paint. They decided they want to do a picture of Santa Claus, and it's nigh. I don't want to say photorealistic, although I believe in terms of actual like photography, that is the correct term. It's totally different when it comes to like video games and motion video. I believe the actual word for it is different because it's not a still image. But regardless, you see the whole process of this particular image, which I in fact showed you, and it's pretty eerie how accurate to how a person's face would look like, how the hair works, how the shadows work, the fact that the face isn't all in one color. It's varied color from like greens to blues to your pinks to your whites. It's kind of scary to think about how long it took them to do it.
Oh, I know. I'm like, Yeah, because at first I was wondering, is the video just, is it super sped up, or have they just like taken like screenshots of every now and then when they're doing a frame? And you watch the video, you can clearly tell it is a sped up thing. But I don't believe for a second they did that within a day. I mean, that's a long, drawn out process for that kind of thing. And you know, like, I've seen that kind of stuff done before. To be honest with you, I've seen someone with an actual canvas in front of them or a sheet of paper. One of the examples I give to you earlier today was I watched someone do that with Robin Williams. They just started out with a very rough sketch and they just kept going and going and going and going until it actually looked like a photograph of Robin Williams by the end of it. And I was like, bloody hell, that's insane. But I actually think it's even more insane to see that be done on a program like Paint. Because that's always, you know, you tell anyone, you know, anyone that's like, I really want Photoshop or want to use Photoshop, I'm into like, I want to draw pictures or want to like edit photos to make them like look different or whatever, do thumbnails or any of that kind of stuff. And you might, a response you could give them is, oh, you got Paint, haven't you? Like, yeah, but Paint shit. It's like, well, clearly not.
Yeah.
Paint is capable of pretty much doing anything you need it to do.
It is.
At that point. When you mention the different colours, that, you know, you see like colours being spray painted on this Santa Claus face that you're like, how's that going to work? Because, you know, that colour isn't, you're never going to see that. You don't see that colour on anyone's face. But it's not that believable, because if you go into something like Photoshop or even Paint to a degree and you zoom all the way in just to look at the pixel colors, you often do actually see these random colors that you wouldn't expect to see when you zoom that far in. So it's impressive that they've been able to figure all of that out. Just how long it must have took them to do it. That's insane. But you should definitely check that one out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, links will be in the description below.
Talk a bit more about this Paint stuff, because it is actually quite impressive, the stuff that
when it comes to like, I've seen other impressive works being done in Paint, like black and white photos kind of deal, like starting from scratch and coming up with a photorealistic image of a person or a place. I think, in fact, I have seen somebody. I might need to correct myself later on when I go home, but I believe I've seen someone use MS Paint and do a rather similar, if not a follow along to Bob Ross.
Yeah.
And the end result was rather, I say that, I was going to say rather impressive, but if you follow along with Bob Ross and listen to his advice, you're going to end up with something that looks at least half decent.
I've heard of like a few people actually doing that. Like, sometimes people do it on Photoshop, obviously, but of some people actually just going on Paint and following along with Bob Ross and seeing what results they get out of it. I've not actually sat down and watched a video on that, but I've heard of several people doing that.
Yeah,
I think it'd be interesting though, because obviously this is all leading up to talking about like live action movies and all that, and you see that the detail that even something like Paint is capable of achieving. I just kind of wonder. No movie studio would ever try, because it'd be far too expensive to do for like a feature length kind of thing. Although it would be interesting to see someone try. But I wonder if anyone's sort of try to do that for like animation or for a live action thing, similar to what, you know, like what I did with my old stuff on the Ben 10 back in the Dawn of One videos, where I basically just used Paint to do like the alien creatures. I would be interested to see if someone actually tried to do a full-on like photorealism animated character, even if it was just like in a 2-minute thing or whatever, but in a live action setting and just use Paint for all of the frames. I mean, that could take years just to do a 2-minute thing there. But and I don't think anyone's got that kind of time for it. But I still think it'd be really interesting if someone gave that a shot, just to see what they could come out with. Because assuming that they know how to actually animate, and as in like actually know how like bone structure and everything works, and movement, where all the joints are properly. Because it's fair enough if your thing looks photorealistic, but if you don't know how to move a person properly, then it's going to throw it right off. But yeah, I think it would look really cool if someone give that a shot.
Yeah,
it'd be really kind of cool.
Although saying that, I haven't seen nor heard of anybody doing anything similar to that. However, I have seen, and it was a very long time ago. We're talking maybe like 10 plus years, something along those lines. I have seen an animation that was purely created via painted on canvas.
Mm-hmm.
So they would literally paint on the canvas, wait until the image is done, and then take the picture. Yeah.
I mean, it's not so far-fetched, because there's films out in the past, back when they regularly shot on actual film.
Yeah.
And often it would be in like black and white or whatever. And when they decided they wanted to, like a few directors who wanted to convert their films from black and white to actually being in color, what they would actually go and do is take the film reel, and they would literally sit down with it and they would paint on each individual frame to give it color. That's been done. There's a very specific film I'm thinking of that was done for, and I can't remember the name of it.
It's not The Wizard of Oz.
It's not The Wizard of Oz, no.
That was Technicolor.
Yeah. But really, if you look at the size of a frame, because I've done this kind of stuff back at uni before, and I only had to scratch a frame to sort of try and draw a picture into it, just for out several frames, and they're so small, it's next to impossible to get a detail, any kind of detail in there. But so how someone spent that doing, like, literally painting frames of a feature-length movie. I mean, obviously you get a magnifying glass and all that and a very fine-tipped paintbrush, but the effort and how precise you'd have had to have been for that is just, it's insane to think about.
I mean, there are some really impressive works that have been done on a very small scale, like carving a very, what would you classify as a statue? Like carving a statue into like pencil lead.
Yeah.
What's another one? There's a person in, I believe, China who paints pieces of art on rice.
Right. I've heard of that.
Yeah. And there's another instance of something really small. It might be made out of toothpicks, so they would actually carve wood, and it would be like the tip of a toothpick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's many impressive things, but I think. But the main problem with any of that kind of stuff, at least in the subject that we're talking about, is it's really a bit too time consuming to ever even consider that as the method of how to do it. Sure, it might be one of the ways to get an insane amount of precision with detail, but to get like a feature length movie out within the 2 to 3 year period that a film typically takes to make, the number of people you'd have to hire for that, and the price that would cost would just... The
amount of directors that would dip in and dip out.
It wouldn't be worth it at the end of the day. It wouldn't be cost efficient.
Yeah.
So. Is there any in-between we can jump to before getting to, like, I don't know, into video game kind of territory? Just because it's quite a big jump to go from something like paint straight into video games.
I'm not sure.
There's nothing that's really jumping to mind.
I mean, VR, but
no, that's really still in the game.
Yeah,
getting close to movie genre as well.
Although apparently we're getting closer to having VR cinemas.
Oh, I believe that. I believe that fully.
Which I'm semi-looking forward to.
I'm semi-looking forward to that as well. I think it'll be very slightly off topic, but, whatever. I think it'd be really interesting to see how you achieve a film while having it be VR compatible. Because the whole point of film, and especially cinematography, is controlling your audience's eyes.
Yeah.
And so you angle the camera in a very specific way that will almost force the audience to look at a very specific thing. So you basically always control where the audience is looking in a film, which is how you can direct a story. It's how you can make a story flow forward. Because if the audience misses that significant thing, things might not make sense later on. How do you achieve that, though, when it comes to VR? Because you have no control over where the audience looks. You can't force them to see something.
You can't force them, but you could push them towards it, which is what directors essentially do anyway. And what it is instead of just solely focusing... I apologize to any... to the editor and anybody out there who works in professional audio, but cinema is mainly a visual thing.
Yeah.
As far as I can see, audio does come second.
Well,
comparatively.
maybe okay. I mean,
So
sure.
so instead of just putting like a VR headset on a person, I would not take it. I would not. I would not take it. Oh, what? I'm looking for a term. The opposite of that far. Do you see where I'm going?
The opposite of that far.
Yeah.
Really close.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go. I'll go with that. So I wouldn't take it that close. I wouldn't remove it that close. See, it doesn't really work, does it?
Rewind slightly and start the sentence again, and I might be able to help.
Okay. So, in order to push people towards what the director actually wants you to focus on, audio being visually in the cinema,
film being visual,
film being a mostly visual thing, and arguably audio coming second and just adding to the visuals. I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't take a VR. I wouldn't just have a VR headset. I would also put headphones on people.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have the case where you're in an open room. Actually, I'll say you'd be in a medium-sized room, ideally. Maybe with a few groups of people, but not a large group as you would get in a traditional cinema. Cinema. I would have a smaller room. I would have people have headphones on. Unfortunately, that would kind of like make it more of like a one-to-one experience with the movie. But I think that's what you want when you put on a VR headset.
Yeah.
And I would focus not just on. I would have the movie so that they're not just focused on just the visuals. I would have audio be even far more important thing.
I mean, that's pretty much the only way I can think of how you direct someone towards looking at specific things. You really have to amplify just how important surround sound is then in a VR situation. Yeah. First of all, just to immerse people in the first place. But if a noise comes from a very specific point in the supposed room, then most people watching the film will look towards the point in which the noise came from. And so then they will see whatever the significant thing is that they have to see.
Yeah.
It's just, unfortunately, obviously, if you go back and rewatch that film several more times and you watch it in VR, you're most likely going to intentionally choose to not look in the specific directions that you looked in the original time.
I think it's fine if you've had
you have like a very
original intended experience.
Sure, but you could argue that it's a good thing that you get a different experience every time with the movie, because if you don't always choose to look at the same thing, the experience could like completely change the outcome. Well, not the outcome of the movie, but your immersion with the film. But it's just whether or not how heavily does the director rely on the fact that you looked where he wanted you to look. Because if it's a thing where it's like a horror kind of deal, and the monster, say, comes at you, like which sounds a bit video gamey when you're going to VR territory, but if you intentionally choose not to look, and then something happens where the monster's got you or whatever, it doesn't really work if you're not looking in the direction that you're supposed to be looking in.
Yeah.
So it's a risk. It'll be interesting to see, and I'm also curious how they're going to do it as a cinema, just because if they're going to go 360, VR doesn't really work sitting down because it restricts you in terms of turning your head around. It's a bit of a pain in the arse to look behind you. Whereas if you're completely stood up, then you've got a lot more freedom when it comes to that kind of stuff. But anyone that doesn't have previous experience with VR is then at risk of motion sickness and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, people were already at risk when 3D came to cinemas properly. And people still get motion sickness.
I'm glad you brought up 3D, actually, because I think VR might be the revival of 3D.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't think 3D works in the cinema as it currently exists.
Yeah.
But 3D in VR is amazing.
Wait, hold on. VR is 3D regardless.
It's not. It's a 2D video. There's no depth to it.
There is depth.
There's not depth. Not in a video game, yes, because you're in an actual digital world with you're not in a rendered format.
Oh, okay. I see what you're
Right?
saying. Yeah.
In a film, you're in a 2D space. You know, you're not literally in that room. Which, to be fair, even if it's a 3D film, you're not literally in that room anyway.
Yeah.
But if you watch a 3D VR, like say video or whatever, then there's suddenly depth to it. Any experience I've really had with 3D VR at the moment, it's not perfect because it's still a bit fuzzy now.
Oh, that's mainly because of resolution. And
Well, that's
pixel
a lot to do
density.
with the fact that the resolution isn't there yet for that kind of stuff, and depth-wise, the current way that it operates, it's like the focus essentially of a camera. So if the 3D is really good up close, it's quite bad for things that are far away from it. Whereas if things are really good up far away, if it gets too close to you, it starts to split off into two different things.
Yeah, that's a limitation of the VR.
That's just the limits of what's there now.
PlayStation VR.
But
When it comes to things like picture fidelity, what you really want to be looking at is either, and I believe I've got this correct, but there's a 4K VR headset that's currently being developed in China, I believe, or Korea. There's also the HTC Vive, which is a very popular choice when it comes to fidelity or so. I haven't had personal experience. And then you've got what's it called? The other one.
the other VR headset.
The Oculus Rift.
The Oculus Rift.
Which isn't as good as I've heard. It's not as good when it comes to fidelity again, but it's better than what you get on the consoles.
I have to say, I don't necessarily agree with your comment that, at least when I'm talking about the 3D not working in its entirety, I don't necessarily agree that that's a limitation of the VR for the PlayStation specifically. I think that's more the person that shot the video doesn't necessarily have the 3D fully set up correctly, or hasn't educated the actors as to where they should stand.
Okay.
I think that's more the case because, like I said, with different videos, it's different. Sometimes, like for next to all of it, it's all really good, and then on other videos, it's like things that are right next to you are really proportionally out compared to things that are in front of you.
Well,
so
as far as I
it's
know,
kinks
that's
that
actually...
we all really need to figure out.
well, it is from what you've just described, like the distortion. That's mainly because of the lens.
No, that's the video.
Oh,
That's just the way that they've formatted the video. That's just the way that they've essentially made the 3D occur on the video. Because, like I said, with video games, any of the other kind of stuff, and video games are the technical 3D stuff of VR. You don't get any of that stuff with video games. It's perfect.
Right.
It's just people, still amateurs, still figuring out how this works now. Because VR is this new technology for them to play around with, at least when it comes to recording it, especially. So I think you could get some really interesting stuff with it. Anyway, I did have another point that I was going to bring up. It was to jump off something that you mentioned. I've kind of forgot what it was.
Oh, wonderful.
So that's useful. Well done, me.
You are excused, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
No, I've remembered now. You might get different results on something like I think you get similar results with stuff like the Oculus, the Vive, and the PlayStation VR, just because of the way their screens operate. But something like maybe the Google Cardboard or whatever, or the mobile ones, I think you're going to get a different experience with. And I'm not saying one's better than the other in terms of the 3D anyway, but I'm just saying the way that the screens operate, because back when you were showing off the side-by-side videos, like on YouTube or whatever, and if you cross-eye, it basically becomes a 3D video. That's sort of how VR works with like the cardboard headsets. It basically turns those two images into one. Now, technically, yes, you have two screens on the proper VR headsets, but they're not... Basically, like in videos that often get uploaded to, say, YouTube or whatever, some people will upload proper VR videos, and other people will upload side-by-side videos, so they're going to give you a different experience. People that upload the side-by-side videos, they're meant for, like, the Google Cardboard users. And they'll get a different
and also
kind
the
of 3D
3DS
experience.
Oddly enough, it works on there.
Sure, the 3DS. And then but they don't work on like the Oculus, they don't work on the Vive, they don't work on the PSVR.
Yeah.
Because then essentially you have two screens showing side by side images. So then you're technically looking at four of the same shots at that point. So yeah, different VR headsets will give you different results, but I think it's mostly down to the people behind the camera actually still figuring out how to operate this stuff. But I do think VR will be the thing to revive 3D. But as of now, it needs to go away.
No, they can't make it go away. Because if it went away, then there'd be no development.
No, 3D needs to go away.
Oh, 3D. I totally agree with that.
The current state of 3D needs to go away.
Although, it might have been a while ago, and people who are outside of the Newcastle area might not know about this, but we have something called the Life Center. Actually, in the previous video, you might actually find that. But we have something called the Life Center, which is essentially a place where it's an interactive place, and it's all about like science and whatnot. They do some special stuff, like we've been to a Doctor Who hosting kind of deal, where they showed off some of the props, some experiences.
Right. Yeah. Now I remember.
And it's going back a while ago, but they do have a 4D, a mini 4D cinema.
It's actually a more extreme 4D than what you get in the cinemas.
Because the chairs actually do move.
Actually, I think it's technically 5D now.
5D?
Yeah, because like...
Wait, isn't 5D supposed to incorporate smells?
No, 5D incorporates the environment. So basically, and this is what it does over at Life Center now, if, say, because it's usually like on a roller coaster type thing. So if you're going on a roller coaster and you basically splash through this river or whatever, in the Life Center, when you sat on those chairs and you've just like took your dive, you will get sprayed with water now. And it's got a bunch of that different stuff. It's got like big fans and everything to blow wind into your face.
Okay.
So I think it's technically a 5D mini cinema now.
What was I saying? Yeah. Long time ago, when we were wee kiddies, they had 3D in this particular cinema. And we're talking about proper 3D where you actually had to have the glasses on. And it looked really, really good.
Yep.
The chair's taken out the equation. It looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it was the main reason to go to the Life Center. To be honest, like yes, pretty much everything in there was interesting, and you pretty much wanted to go into every room. But the big reason you went there was for that mini cinema room. There was nothing else like it, and especially for like once it moved up to 4D. 4D with its the moving seats, which I pretty much don't remember a time without the moving seats.
I do.
To be honest with you.
I do.
But yeah, I think last time I went there was maybe about 2 years ago, which is when I discovered that they've incorporated the extra elements now. I have to say, a film I would love to see in VR experience with, and maybe, although actually that could be how cinemas control where you look. Because if they put you in a VR headset and they do sit you down on a seat, and they have seats that are almost as extreme as the Life Centers, they could essentially force you to look in certain
No, they would have to be slightly more extreme because the chairs would have to rotate.
They'd have to be able to fully rotate, and obviously you wouldn't be able to occupy as many people in the room. But that could be a way you do it. You wouldn't be able to get the same experience at home, obviously, but that would be a really cool way. Lots of people would start going to the cinema with that experience on offer.
Of course, they would have to charge you more money.
It would be a lot more expensive, sure, but it would be like going to a roller coaster park or whatever. It would be a ride in itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, a film I would love to see in that kind of experience would be Hardcore Henry. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it.
I've heard of Hardcore Henry. He was a cartoon at first. No, sorry, I'm thinking of Horrible Henry.
Yeah, you're thinking Horrible Henry. Hardcore Henry is a movie that came out about 2 or 3 years ago. It's completely first person. It's pretty much, to a relative degree, a one-shot movie. And it's basically just this action fest. It's this crazy, insane movie that, without any 3D experience, without any VR, nothing, just literally sitting watching in the cinema, has given people motion sickness and forced them to have to walk out of the room.
Oh, okay.
So that, and I went to see that film. I've never been interested in rewatching the film, like at home, But seeing that film in the cinema I loved it. It's not necessarily this amazing film or whatever, but as an experience, it's really good.
Right.
To have that in like a full-on 3D VR 5D experience would be insane, and many people would throw up that day. Do not go into the cinema with that kind of experience with their food at hand.
I mean, I don't think you're allowed to take food on the seats like in the live center.
You know.
Although I won't go as far to say as don't eat anything for like an hour beforehand. Although I was going to say it like swimming, but that's actually untrue. You don't actually get cramp after. It's totally untrue. It was made up by parents, okay? It was made up by parents who didn't want their who didn't want to look after the child while they wanted to do other things.
Yep.
Yep.
But I don't know, I think VR, just to get back on topic here, that could be a potential way of... It's not necessarily anything to make developing a more photorealistic CGI character possible for developers, but in terms of an audience experience and in believing that a CGI character is real, a VR experience could do that, because with the person actually being in that world, I think you'd be a lot more forgiving when it comes to like the graphics and everything and how visually real something looks. So even if you sort of have them in a live action setting, but a CGI character walks up to them, it's very most likely that during the VR experience, at least, you would believe that person or character is real. So yeah, it might not necessarily be technically what we're talking about in the sense of how far are we off from actually not being able to tell the difference. But it would be a stepping stone to it, maybe even making people a bit more forgiving and accepting towards the likes of CGI and the possibilities of it. But yeah, we were going to jump into games, which we kind of have done with VR a bit. That's a tricky one, I think, with video games, because next to every year, I think that video games have practically already done it, you know, when it comes to the photorealism.
No.
They haven't. I'm not saying they have, but almost every year I feel like they have. Because pretty much when any game comes out, you see the new graphics that game's got, and it's bloody insane. Basically, you see the gameplay graphics of that, and you think, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, that was the graphics of that franchise's like cinematic trailer or whatever. And I'm not just talking about Assassin's Creed, I'm talking about like the Batman games and all that kind of other stuff. Pretty much any game that's had a cinematic trailer for itself, assuming it's still ongoing today and intentionally trying to up its graphics, most likely has gameplay graphics that top its cinematic trailers, CGI. So I think games are ones that...
Although, hold on, these days they don't do that. Because these days they go and use the in-game assets rather than creating a whole CG.
That's debatable. Many companies still completely do cinematic.
Well, I mean, instances like World of Warcraft still do that. But when it comes to stuff like what's a good example? GTA 5 doesn't do that. I believe what's that game that's coming up? Metal Gear never did that.
Well, if they never did that, then they're not in the running for this debate.
What's a really good... Death Stranding, that's up and coming. All that stuff is in-game assets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's many games that since the start of video games ever being made just used in-game assets to advertise their stuff. Point being, games that didn't always do that and actually did proper cinematic, almost photorealistic looking trailers for their video games, now their actual games either look like what those trailers look like or look better than what those trailers look like. And that's insane to think, because it might have been 10 years on or something, but really that's such a short space of time to improve that drastically. But I do think I mentioned this to you very briefly earlier, I think video games are a really tricky sort of subject when it comes to determining whether or not they've achieved photorealism.
I don't think any video game has achieved it.
I think many video games are close to it.
I think they're close to it, but I think there's one caveat, which is artistic interpretation, which would be like, you know, going from essentially what you could classify as a piece of digital clay to a finished product. And it's weird because it's been proven that things like Watch Dogs was a good example. When the original E3 stuff came out with all those graphics, that looked really great. But then they were like, no, we're not going to have that. we're gonna make it look shittier because we choose to. It has been cases where, in fact, I believe it's already been said by developers that they can, and in fact could, at any time create a photorealistic game, shit, video realism. I'll call it because it seems to make
it's
more sense.
actually called photorealism.
Well,
That is
okay.
its actual term. So don't worry.
Okay, so they are capable of doing it, but it's kind. I forget the rest of it, but it's along the lines of, it's either it's really limiting artistically, or I don't think it's to do with graphics or anything, because all the games have been proven to be able to have that fidelity. But it's something along those lines that they are actually capable of doing it right now. They just don't.
You know what? I think I think mostly because of cost efficiency is the reason why they don't. Because in order for a franchise to really keep going, and many game companies have come out and said this, they have to essentially keep reusing assets if they want to keep their franchise going, because it's a way to save money and continue to make money. And doing something along the lines of making a whole game that's photorealistic, that's going to be a very expensive thing, where you're going to have to take a lot of time out just to focus on this one game. I don't think for a second that it's necessarily restricting, since a lot of franchises and games generally do want to try and make their games look as realistic as possible. But at the same time, going back to it being tricky, I think that's it's a big claim to be able to say, oh, we could do it whenever we wanted. We could make photorealistic. But even if they said, and we're going to prove it, and we're going to do it, and then they release a game and say, there you go, it's photorealistic, you still can't prove that it's photorealistic because of the fact that these CGI characters, essentially, that you're playing as, are in a CGI world.
Right.
So they're going to look photorealistic because they work against the backdrop of their world. If you cut them out of the game and put them in a live action setting, they won't look real.
Now, hold on. What's your definition of photorealism then?
As in, looks like real life.
So technically, no, realistically, you could say that if it happened and a game was photorealistic, and the lighting worked the same as it does in real life, all the textures were exactly the same as what they're supposed to be in real life, yes, you can have a photorealistic game.
But you can't prove it.
Well, you could.
You can't, though. You can't prove it because they're in a fake world. They're not in a real world.
Right.
Unless you see that character in a live action setting, you don't know that it's literally photorealistic.
Well, as long as you do the lighting the same.
You can make it look... You can, have everyone believe that it's photorealistic, and technically in a game environment have it be photorealistic, but you can't actually prove that it is, because it's not in a real world setting.
Right.
People can't see it in a real world setting.
Right.
And here's the thing. It doesn't matter if they have the lights almost be identical to the real world setting. They're not going to be identical to the real world setting because it's digitally created light.
Right.
It's not real.
Right.
You're completely not picking up what I'm getting here.
It kind of doesn't make any sense considering the Spider. Well, I know it's not video game, but the Spider-Man CG stuff that you showed me, the light that's on him is CG.
Yeah. Right, but here's the thing. You can prove, and they have proven, that it was photorealistic.
Right.
Because that environment that he was in was not CGI.
Right.
He was on a real background. They actually had a camera there and shot that, and then imposed a CGI character into that.
Right.
When you're playing a video game, which is the instance you will see as an audience, you will see the video game as that format.
Right.
They're not in a real setting. They're in a made-up, by the game developers setting.
Right.
So you can't prove that it's photorealistic because you can't see that character in an actual real-life setting.
Okay, so in order to get
you would literally have to go into the game, take the model out of the game,
right,
take a video or something in your backyard or whatever, and impose that game character into that video.
Right.
and see if he looked like he was actually in your back garden.
Well, assuming that, again, the textures were correct, assuming that the colors are correct to what they would be in real life, assuming that you get the lighting correct, you could, and it could in fact be CG.
It is CG.
No, sorry, it could in fact be photorealistic.
Well, I'm saying it might be photorealistic,
Right.
but that's why games are tricky, because you can't really prove that they are. It's
Well, you could if they did that method that you just talked about, but,
right, but they
there's
don't
no
do
real
that.
point in doing
Games
that.
don't do that. Is my point being. Point being is movies are the real measurement to decide whether or not we've reached photorealism, because that's where you have your live action environment,
Right.
and you have a CG character imposed into that. Whereas video games, a lot of video games are graphically better than half of the Hollywood movies that are out today. But it's like comparing apples to oranges, essentially, because of the fact those CGI characters are in a CGI world. It might be a completely different scenario if you took those CGI characters out of that world and put them into a real world environment. In that case, you might look at that and say, actually, no, the Hollywood CGI movie character is far better than the video game one. It's just they have the advantage of being in that CGI world. It's like, it would be much easier for a film to do a fully CGI movie and have all the CGI characters look real, because then essentially you're creating them in a CGI world. So like Jungle Book has an easier time. Lion King, when that comes out, will have an easier time fooling people into thinking it's photorealism, because everything's going to be CG. There's not going to be a single real thing in there. Whereas if they literally just CGI'd a lion and actually shot footage of a forest or a jungle and imposed the lion into that, it might not work as well. So my point being is it's a bit tricky to determine whether or not video games have actually achieved the photorealism. The films are a much better measurement for that kind of thing. I'm not saying like video games won't. I think they will, and I look forward to that day where I actually feel like I'm controlling a real life human being in the real life world. That would be kind of cool. It might be kind of weird when you're playing GTA and all that, and you're slaughtering people.
No,
But
you can still tell it's a video game.
well, of course, because you went and bought it. You went and bought the game and stuck it in your console.
Well, yeah, but some
to
people
have
are
it
stupid.
actually fool you into believing, wow, this actually looks like I'm in the real world right now, would be amazing.
To jump off your Lion King thing, did you ever actually believe that The Life of Pi had a tiger inside of a boat?
Never watched The Life of Pi.
Did you not?
No.
Have you seen the trailers at least?
No, I've seen images.
Oh, okay.
And images aren't fair to judge off either, because
True.
an image can make something look real.
Well, the images that
Whereas
you've seen...
once you see it moving, you might not believe it.
as a starting point, the images that you've seen,
Sure.
did you believe
I
that there was a
looked at
tiger in
them
the
for
boat?
like half a second, so yeah, I didn't analyze them
Okay.
enough to judge.
Well, when it comes to... And I think similar to Jungle Book, I can actually tell that they are CG characters, no matter how realistic they are. It's the same case. It took me a while, but it's the same case with the... It was the same case with the tiger in The Life of Pi. I know that there are some instances where they actually do use a live tiger, but the instances where it's a CG tiger, I can tell. The instance where I saw the Spider-Man CG stuff, it took us a while, but I did eventually get there. And I'm not a colorist. I'm not to any professional degree. I'm not a CG designer by any typical degree. I am not a professional artist by any means. But to me, when it comes down to everything, it's always the coloring that gets me. It's always like something around it's like the outline of the character. No, that doesn't look correct. You don't look like you're in the scene. The fact that your shading is completely different to everything else, I can always catch it. Even when I first saw Gollum, I was like, that looks kind of cool, but I can tell it's not there. Where everybody else was kind of on the edge back then.
It's one of those things, and this is really what jumped us off of the whole talking about lighting and everything. Is that I know you haven't seen this movie, but most people will know what I'm referring to here. In Rogue One, the Star Wars movie that came out before Last Jedi and all that, they had like Grand Moff Tarkin, I think it is. He was in the movie, right?
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
was obviously an actor, did play him, but they basically digitally imposed.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting the actor's name. It'll not come to us.
Liam Neeson?
No, not Liam Neeson.
Who's Liam Neeson?
Qui-Gon.
Oh, right, okay.
No, they digitally, either way, they digitally imposed the actor's face on from the original Star Wars movie onto this actor's face, right? And there's some scenes where it looks really good.
Yeah.
You can tell it's CGI, but there are scenes where it looks really good. There are other scenes where it doesn't look so very good. I believe a term that people have commonly referred to it as, it's like the uncanny valley.
Uncanny Valley, yeah.
But what the people that actually made the movie went and done was they essentially proved that the face that they made was accurate and photorealistic to the actor's face from the original movie. Because what they went and done was they basically put the CGI, I don't know if they got the actual actor or whatever, but they basically put the CGI face in a room that had the exact same lighting as what the actor did in the original movie, and you couldn't tell the difference between the actor and the CGI face. And then they take that out and put it into the new movie that has a different lighting setup. The shading's all different on it, and suddenly it looks completely CGI. It doesn't look real whatsoever. So lighting, shading, color makes so much difference when it comes to this kind of stuff. And that's one of the, I think, when it comes to detail, and especially if maybe you want to talk about graphics as well, we might already be there in terms of it looking real. It's now just getting that color right. It's getting the shading right, which was still a little bit off. But I don't know.
Although when it comes to environments, we're spot on.
Oh, well, to be fair, we are still pretty spot on when it comes to other CGI stuff. I mean, there's things that you can watch where it's like, say, a top 10 list of things that you didn't know were CG in movies, and you watch them and you're like, okay, wow, that's impressive. Actually, I just thought that was a generic scene. Holy shit. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Environments, we've nailed that. Although I will say, when it comes to Jungle Book especially, I actually think they did a better job with the CGI on all the animals than they did on the environment.
Oh, okay.
I actually believed, I was closer to believing that the animals were real than I was to believing that the environment were real. But that was just because of little details, like if they were swinging on a branch or something, the branch didn't necessarily move in the way that you'd expect a branch to move. Like it didn't move naturally.
Yeah.
It was a bit more fantasy or whatever. So, and sometimes a tree, like certain trees would just look CGI, whereas like all the animals and everything had so much vivid detail to them. But no, I will agree with you for the most part that that's difficult because they were pretty much working on an entirely CGI set or an entirely CGI scene. Whereas when we're doing environments in a live action world and we actually have live action to be able to compare with, we can essentially look at what the lighting setup is in the environment for the scene that's around it, and then impose the digital stuff and make sure the lighting matches perfectly. And audiences will never be able to tell the difference. They'll not even think about it, which is once again one of my big reasons why I'm such an advocate of saying a lot of CGI in a movie is not a bad thing.
No.
Because you only notice it when it's bad. When it's good, you never make any comments on it because you never know that it's there. Good CGI, if it's good CGI, you don't know it exists.
Yeah.
That's basically the motto to it. And pretty much every film you ever watch has a shit ton of CGI in it. You just don't know it because it's that good. And it's usually environment based. I watched like a video of something where it was just an actor walking down a street and it was a complete like winter's day. There was like snow completely covering the roads and everything. And then they basically took all the effects off the video and it was like he was walking in the middle of a street during summer or something. It was like a very warm environment, no snow whatsoever. It was like, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. So, I don't know. Do you think how far do you think we're off? Do you think we're decades still?
Considering rate of improvement, no. It could happen anywhere between 2 years to... no, I'm sorry. It could have actually have already happened, which it probably has, considering how the military develops things, and then it trickles down into the industries and whatnot. So most likely, it's already happened. We've already got the technology for it. It's just waiting until a time where the process becomes quick enough so that you can make money faster than you're losing money. So I reckon either it's going to happen as early as this year or as late as 3 years from now.
Okay. I think it's going to take a bit longer than that. I think we could be looking at roughly still a decade of relatively easily being able to tell the difference between real life and CGI, at least when, as far as characters are concerned, as far as like especially human being characters, because they're the ones that are easiest to make out, just because we know how we move and we know how we look. I think it won't take us very long to get to the color and the shading and setting the lighting up correctly on CGI stuff. I think we're quite close to that already.
Yeah.
So in that perspective, if you just take a still frame of a CGI creature in a movie, very easily you could fool people into thinking whatever's in that film is real life. I think where we're still really far off, and motion capture is a very big help, and performance capture is a very big help towards this, is the movement of a lot of CGI characters. There's just so many times, especially in like the big blockbuster stuff, where a character who's a real life person might turn into a CGI character for a second just to do this action scene, and they don't move in a very natural way. It stands out like a sore thumb, essentially. I think we're still quite a way off of that. So there's still many like little baby steps that we've got to hit to get to that point where we can actually be fooled into believing this stuff is real. And I think the actual animation side of it is a big part in that. And I think that one's going to take longer to nail. It could be like maybe 6 to 10 years before I think we're there on that one. But maybe just outside of the next decade, we might be at that point of actually not being able to tell the difference. But that might just be us, because younger generations then might still be able to tell the difference, because older generations now would probably be like mind blown when they see half of the CGI stuff, just because they're not used to that, because as they were growing up they didn't have any of that. We grew up more used to that kind of stuff, at least growing up as that stuff was becoming more involved with film, and younger generations were born with this kind of stuff, so it takes so much more convincing. And even then, I have to say, CGI, unfortunately, my one gripe with it is it ages very fast. Mostly because every year movies are up in the game with how good the CGI looks. So it looks great the first time you see it, and then you rewatch it 7 years later, when dozens of other films that have come out with CGI that's so much better, and you rewatch that other film and you're like, oh wow, did I really believe that was real back then? Because it's so obviously CGI now. It's just one example is like just Iron Man, for example. The very first Iron Man, I can see his helmet like sort of floating off his shoulders. I couldn't the very first time I saw the film. I thought, I was fully granted I was a child at the time, but I fully believed, there was this full-on mech suit and everything.
Well, during the first Iron Man, you wouldn't be too far off, because there was actually a physical suit.
Well, he did wear a lot of portions of the suit, and then there was just added layers of like CGI onto the suit, and the helmet was one of the biggest factors of the CGI part of it. But now whenever I watch that first film, I can see which parts are real and which parts are CGI, but that's just because CGI ages really fast. I always, personally, for me, I like CGI over practical. I really don't care. To be honest with you, I don't care what you choose. If you choose practical or if you choose CGI, I really don't care. I think CGI has a lot of advantages over practical, but I think there's things that practical can do that's better than CGI as well. One of the big things is I don't think practical ages as quickly. Some people, like younger generations now, might look back at certain things and think certain practical things look stupid, but I think a lot of things that use practical effects, the film still holds up today just as much as it did when it first came out. Whereas a lot of CGI heavy films have aged quite hard compared to when they were first released and there was this big amazing thing. So that's my one negative side with CGI. But overall, within just about the end of the decade, I think we stand a chance before realism.
Do you want to bet?
This could be a 10-year bet, dude.
10? Well, it could either be a this year bet.
Well, actually, no, it's
3
not.
years.
It's
or
not.
10.
It's not. Ooh, see, you'd have to figure out how to work that out.
Well, if I'm correct within 3 years, then I have won. If you're correct after the 3 years, then you have won. But if neither of us are correct, we've both lost.
Right, but that's not my point. I'm saying, like, we could be waiting 10 years to find out.
Potentially.
Whether or not...
Yep.
So your job, basically, in 10 years' time, is to remind us of this bet, just in case we forget.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, we'll see who won.
Yep.
It's going to be a long wait, though.
Long wait.
Long wait.
But in the meantime...
you can all do us a favour. Tell them what that is.
You can press all of the buttons that are available to you on the current page. If you would like to go and watch somebody else's video, please go ahead, but do not forget to press all the buttons, because that's what we're all about. We are all directions, and we encourage everybody to press all the buttons.
Yes, we do. And while you're getting into the habit of watching other people's videos, get into the habit of watching some of our stuff. We do have some really good stuff up there.
Indeed.
Chrissy mentioned the Life Center earlier. I said it's in a video. That literally just went up like a few days ago, maybe.
A few days ago.
Or is it coming? I don't
It's
even
coming.
know. I haven't got a clue. I don't know what day it is. I don't know where I am. I'm lost. But either way, you'll see it. It's part of the one-off. If you're interested in that, there's a bunch of sketch stuff in the one-off, bunch of gameplay videos. If you're interested in some PS2 era stuff, we've got like a Star Wars. So much stuff, and so much stuff to come.
Yep.
Thank you all for watching, guys. See you next time.
Oh, there's also a belly button.